everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dogcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. We got the whole crew with us for the first time. All three of us are on a podcast together. Benjamin Wolk and Kip Adams. Getting ready for what looks like it's going to be another busy week. Plenty of news, plenty of things to get to in what is a busy time of year, both when it comes to schedule and looking to the future and also recruiting. As we know, Georgia has stayed very busy. Ben, you've got a full week under your belt now. How are things treating you as you pretty much jump into the deep end when it comes to covering recruiting?
Yeah, no, Georgia took it easy on me the first week. They didn't have anything exciting going on in the recruiting space, so it was a nice, easy, slow way to break it back into the game. No, I'm sure we'll talk about that all a lot more here over the next, 20, 30 minutes or so, but it was a great first week. I appreciate everyone on the Junkyard being so thoughtful with their compliments throughout the week, and we hope to keep bringing you good coverage.
No doubt about it. Kip, how is this week treating you as we go, as hard as it is to believe, we're about a month away from SEC Media Days.
Yeah, I'm still catching up and trying to read through all of Ben's work. It's he kind of overloaded us and set the bar ridiculously high for some of us, maybe more so some than others. But it's just a content overload right now, trying to just catch my breath and read it all myself and try to, just get a grasp on everything that's going on, because I feel like we're just getting fastballs, heaters left and right now. And, it's a great time to be covering Georgia. And so I just, with the crew we got here, I feel like we're very well prepared as you can be in this industry to kind of break it all down. And so I'm enjoying the ride right now. It's been a fun time. I've been through some of the lows, and we're definitely kind of in the highs right now.
No doubt about it. And it will be, I'm sure it's going to remain that way in the weeks and months to come as we get ready for the 2023 season. Now, let's start with, really a lot to talk about on this episode, but let's start with what will be the news of today, which we are recording this on Wednesday. And we'll have a little bit more knowledge about this Wednesday night. Georgia's schedule for the 2024 season. The opponents they will draw out of the SEC. On Wednesday night, the SEC will announce every team's opponents for the 2024 SEC schedule, which will be the first year that Texas and Oklahoma are in the conference. We won't know the dates yet. They are going to announce that at a later date. As we were getting ready to do this, starting to see some reports of who Georgia could be playing. To this point, I've seen a couple. Horns 247 Chip Brown reported Georgia will play at Texas. That will obviously be a very fascinating matchup, and could see Arch Manning going against the Bulldogs. And then Bama Online has reported that Georgia will play at Alabama. A return to Tuscaloosa kind of caught me off guard. I sort of thought that game could be on the schedule, but it could be in Sanford Stadium. Kip, let's just talk about what we know to this point. What do you think about how this schedule is shaping up? What are you looking for, and what we're going to find out later tonight?
We knew that Georgia would probably be going to play a team in the West, out West, that they hadn't played before. It's a little humorous that it looks like Georgia will be playing at Texas before ever playing Texas A&M. I think it's just hilarious, but obviously a new opponent, exciting for Georgia fans. The Alabama news kind of caught me off guard as well. I mean, everybody, usually you look at schedules, you look at the fact that, Georgia last hosted Alabama in 2015, went to Tuscaloosa in 2020. So you're thinking, okay, you're going to host Alabama again at some point next couple of years, but playing at Alabama again, probably a little bit of curveball for Georgia fans if that's how it goes down. But, at the same time, that 2020 game didn't go very well. And at the same time, Georgia fans weren't really able to go. They weren't able to attend. So if you're going to look at it on the bright side, this roster and the way things are going right now, there's never a better time for Georgia to get kind of a makeup game and, maybe revenge in Tuscaloosa. Who knows? Obviously, it's going to be a big-time matchup, and a matchup that Georgia fans will now, some fans will have the chance to get tickets to and go watch. And so it looks like it'll be a more competitive matchup, should be. And this is what Georgia fans want. And you look at that, you look at those two opponents, and you add Clemson in there. You can't complain about, having big time games if you're a Georgia fan this season I just think most Georgia fans would probably want one of their top 4 games, if we're adding in Florida, to be in Athens. The fact that their 4 best games won't be in Athens, that's kind of unfortunate for Georgia fans who are coming off right now back-to-back national titles and would expect the conference to, give them something. And so overall, probably a little disappointing just as far as home and away, the way it looks, but that schedule, I mean, as far as big-time matchups, that makes up for the last 2 years in one schedule.
No doubt. Ben, what do you make of what we've learned so far getting ready for the actual release of the news Wednesday night?
Yeah, I mean, I think Kip nailed the 2 things that I was going to call out there too. I mean, going to Austin before you go to College Station is just ridiculous. The fact that that's going to happen is shocking to me. To Kip's point, the 2020 season, everyone didn't get the chance to go to Tuscaloosa necessarily. I think Craig Lawson in the comments said that the COVID season didn't count, which I subscribe to as well. But obviously going to Tuscaloosa twice in 4 years is a little bit odd. And the fact that you look at the 2023 home schedule, it's not a great slate of home games. I actually had a couple season ticket holders that called me in the last hour or so when these things started to leak out. They were like, is Georgia going to get good home games here at any point in the next 2 years? And it doesn't look that promising considering with Texas, Alabama, Clemson already on the schedule. You'd think that, Georgia will probably catch some easier opponents, so to speak, on the other side of things. So the home schedule might not be what people want until 2025, I guess, fingers crossed.
I'm really fascinated to see what winds up happening. We'll learn more. But I thought for sure Alabama would be in Athens. I think the last time they played in Athens was 2015. If anyone was at that game, they're probably not going to claim it. Very ugly game in the rain that Alabama just walked all over Georgia. My biggest things tonight with what we're going to see is how well the SEC sticks to competitive balance, because that's something Greg Sankey talked a good bit about during spring meetings, wanting to keep things balanced. And 2, I kind of did this, and if you're listening to this, you can go check out. I wrote a story sort of projecting what I think the schedule is going to look like for Georgia. How much do you see like an East team playing some of the teams from the West? I feel like, in my mind, the SEC would try to make a concerted effort to say, okay, we're getting rid of divisions and then try to avoid, and then all of a sudden, Georgia's playing 6 teams that used to be in the East or something like that. I feel like they're going to try to do a very good job of balancing that, trying to get some West opponents. But it's going to be fascinating. And I'm sure everybody who sees their schedule is going to say, great, we love this and we're ready to go for 2024.
I'm with you though. Like, I'm curious to know like how much East-West overlap there's going to end up being. Like, we're so accustomed to seeing here's the 6 East teams that Georgia's going to end up having on its schedule. I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't think anybody has shared really what they expect that to look like in terms of that East-West crossover now that there will be no divisions. So I think that's probably, I was just talking through this as well. Like, what do I think the 8 games will be? And it's like, you default to the South Carolina, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, because that's what you're so accustomed to. But who's to say that there aren't more premier teams from the West that might end up on Georgia's schedule too, if you're looking for that potential home game that sticks out to you?
No doubt about it. And we will be all over it tonight. And I'll do my best once everything's wrapped up to put out an audio podcast, just sort of recapping what Georgia's schedule is and probably how Kirby Smart and company feel about it. Ben hinted at this earlier that not a whole lot to have written about since he got started. Just 3 commits in the last week and some change. 3 commits added for Georgia. 4-star defensive end Justin Green, 4-star running back Chauncey Bowens, 4-star defensive tackle Jordan Thomas. And both of those defensive line commits, has been pointed out, came on Tuesday. On Tuesdays, 2 weeks ago, it was Justin Green and then Jordan Thomas on Tuesday this week. Very busy slate for Georgia, adding to what has the potential to be not only the number 1 class in the country, but potentially the most talented, highest rated signing class that has happened, trying to pass that 2022 Texas A&M class. Ben, I'm going to start with you. When you just look at these guys that you've been on staff for since they committed, what do you think about the haul that Georgia has gotten, adding these guys, and the potential they bring to Athens? You're muted.
I won't take everything that I think about, all three of them, Kip. I'll leave some fresh stuff for you too. But, my big takeaway is 3 commitments in, I guess, a week, essentially, from last Tuesday to this Tuesday. Doesn't happen very often. I guess it probably happens in Athens more than it happens in most places, just the way that they recruit and line some of these things up. But Justin Green, obviously, is a 5 tech on the defensive line last week. I think that really got the defensive line class going. I think we're going to see a lot more of that here in June and July, especially. Added Jordan Thomas out of New Jersey. Got a chance to talk with his high school coach, who really just raved about the growth and progression of Jordan Thomas. He went from 195-pound basketball player, edge rusher, when he got to high school, and now he's pushing 300 pounds. I think some of y'all might have seen the video of him jumping over the hurdles as he was doing a drill. I think he was carrying 315 at the time. You actually see him next to a Virginia Tech commit in that video as well, and I think you can sort of see a stark difference between a Georgia athlete and what some other athletes look like as well. So I think that defensive line, buzz is really going to continue here since, when I came on board, there were no D-line commitments at the time. Fran Brown also deserves a major credit for the Jordan Thomas recruitment. He crushes in New Jersey. And then Chauncey Bowens, the flip from Florida. I know everybody will get excited about flipping from a big rival, but this is going to be what looks like probably a 3 running back class for Georgia. And so getting, their second guy on board, much different in terms of how he'll be utilized to a guy like Dwight Phillips that's already in the class, just different type of game that they have. But obviously 3 big commitments, and I don't think Georgia's slowing down throughout the rest of the month or next.
Kip, what are your thoughts on this trio of commits and just what they're bringing to the table?
I think we might as well go ahead and load up a defensive line commit story for next Tuesday. Back-to-back Tuesdays, grabbing a 4-star defensive lineman. We talked about the defensive line as being one of, if not, the most important position group in this cycle, and other than quarterback, which obviously Georgia has already done very well at this cycle so far. But, getting a guy like, again, Justin Green, a guy who's really reshaped his body in an interesting way over the last couple of years. A guy that was put like 215 pounds 2 years ago, and then, getting up to 245 and now pushing 260. That 5 technique position is the one where we talked about. They didn't get anybody there last cycle. They need to get multiple guys at that position this year. And they get a guy that, his arrow has been pointing up for several months, was a standout at the Under Armour Atlanta camp earlier this year. And that's kind of where his, in the industry, his ranking started to skyrocket. And we think probably will continue to do that because his best football is in front of him. Getting him is huge. And obviously Jordan Thomas. And when, Ben and I were trying to figure out, what's Georgia going to do at D tackle? We talked about a lot of 5 techniques, and obviously they're going to get multiple guys there, but they still need to get some interior defensive linemen as well, guys who could play defensive tackle, maybe fill in at nose tackle position if they're trying to give that look as well. And Jordan Thomas is a guy that's over 300 pounds now and a top 100 prospect in the country. Kind of tells you how well Georgia's recruiting right now when we were saying, we haven't really talked about Jordan Thomas a lot, a guy that plays at Don Bosco Prep, one of the top programs in the Northeast. And he comes down and visits, and all of a sudden, Georgia kind of knocks out Michigan and South Carolina and Rutgers and maybe led for him longer than we thought. So he kind of flew under the radar a little bit for us, but Georgia's able to land a top 100 defensive lineman that, again, adds that class that we think will end up being 4 or 5 guys when all is said and done. And then you're flipping a guy like Chauncey Bowens from Florida. This is someone that Dell McGee really keyed in on, December, January, offering him and Kirby Smart going down, flying down the helicopter to his high school. That's when you kind of knew, okay, this guy might be pretty high up on the board. And we look back at these classes that Dell McGee's been able to bring in, bringing in 2 running backs. He's done it a couple of times and had, pretty good success there as far as Elijah Holyfield, Brian Harrion was a solid duo, but obviously the Zamir White, James Cook duo was really solid. And then getting Kendall Milton, Dejon Edwards, Branson Robinson, Andrew Paul, getting 3 guys, that's something that we haven't seen under this coaching staff. But a guy like Dwight Phillips who's just electric with the football. You got a guy like Bowens, who I think, is more of that SEC old school workhorse back, a guy that can get 20, 25 carries a game and probably, wear down defenses towards the end of the game. I think he's got that kind of strength, that lower body strength to really punish defenders in the third and fourth quarter. It's a solid duo right now. If they're able to add Nate Frazier, this is an unprecedented group for him. But I really like where Georgia stands with him, getting him on campus with Chauncey Bowens on an unofficial visit, knowing you have that official visit that you could have later on. I really like where Georgia stands there. I think this running back trio that Del McGee is kind of honed in on is an exceptional group. And he was a guy that everyone's kind of looking, when is Del McGee going to land that elite backfield? And I think being able to get three outstanding guys in one cycle, another assistant that you remove him from that, I guess, Kirby Smart recruiting hot seat list that Georgia fans put up every year because, they want to stack talent at every position. And this cycle, Del McGee is going to do just that.
Yeah, I saw a lot of fans really jumped on that photo. I believe it was Frazier and Bowens and Dell with the 2 championship trophies. That could be one that people don't soon forget. And yeah, you think too, with what Georgia could lose at the running back position after the 2022 season, having that trio could prove to be very, very important. We're going to take a quick break, come back, talk a little bit more recruiting, and then talk about 2 Georgia commits at the Elite 11. Welcome back, everybody. Well, like we mentioned at the start of this podcast, we're almost in the middle of June, as hard as that is to believe, but it's been a busy few weeks for Georgia when it comes to visits and ultimately, as we've seen, with additional commitments to this class. Kip, what do you think of the job Georgia has done to this point when it comes to these visits, when it comes to maximizing having these guys on campus, and what could be in store for the rest of this month?
It's fascinating because July 1st, recruits are, I guess the plan is that they're going to be able to have unlimited official visits. There's been no announcement that schools are able to have more official visits, but I think it's clear that that's what Georgia expects because, we've discussed how important June's become. It's become the kind of the December in the recruiting cycle. But Georgia's set to have, we may have some cancellations next 2 weeks, but as of now, Georgia's set to use 58 official visits before the end of June. And they're not even allowed to have that many under the old rules. So immediately I'm thinking something's got to change, and something probably has changed as far as their interpretation. That's a ton of official visitors. And it's become pretty important to get them in those first couple of weeks in June. And I think the last 2 weeks have kind of become, some Hail Marys, some guys that, maybe that, they didn't think that they're first or second, but they'd still rather get a visit and try to make a move. But I think Georgia's going to add to this class with guys that are visiting, the last weekend in June, if not both weekends. And it's a recruiting class that's already number 1 in the country and pushing for 300 points. There were days when Georgia fans would kind of get a little uneasy and wonder, where's the momentum? And, when is Kirby Smart going to return from the beach and start doing some recruiting again? And they're at 19 commits right now, already an outstanding class. The 300 point marker on 24/7 Sports Team Rankings has always been kind of the barometer. You get past that, you got an elite class. Georgia might pass that, before our next podcast. So I just think that tells you that things are going pretty well in Athens. They're doing a pretty good job of these official visits, and it looks like they got a pretty extensive recruiting board right now because they are getting a lot of guys on campus, double digits every week. And I think we're going to have, as of now, another 22 official visitors over the next 2 weeks. So I think, Georgia's recruiting is humming along, and I don't see this train slowing down anytime soon.
Ben, what are your thoughts on how things have played out to this point and then what we could see in these next few weeks?
Yeah, I mean, 19 commitments by June 14th is pretty self-explanatory. I mean, the classes, you could be happy with this class if it was left as it is. Obviously, it's not going to be left as it is, but my big question is really, how many spots does Georgia feel like it can end up taking in this class? Just because you look at the number of guys that Georgia is in very good position for right now that might even be making summer decisions. And that number is pushing 25 really quickly. So it makes me wonder, where do they feel like they can get? Where are the scholarships available? And then when you play that numbers game, what position groups are going to be prioritized, or what position group might be able to take an additional guy that they weren't initially expecting in the class? I'm really fascinated by the linebacker position right now. Obviously, there's one commitment at linebacker in this class. It's probably the one that people have the most questions on whether it will stick in this class. But then you look at, over the next couple of weeks, I mean, we've mentioned Joseph Phillips a lot at Dogs 24/7. Justin Williams and Chris Cole will both be coming on official visits these next 2 weekends. I've said it before, but they are both like bona fide mid-10 100-meter dash track time guys, which how much Kirby Smart's staff loves those type of guys at linebacker. So I'm interested to see how everything shakes out at linebacker with spots and availability over the course of the summer, just because there's only one guy right now, but it feels like there's a whole host of guys that would kind of like to be in the class as well. And so I'm just interested to see how all of that plays out. But you could really have that conversation at every position group. I mean, Kip's mentioned the defensive line. I'm fascinated by offensive line and wide receiver in terms of how all of that plays out with scholarship spots. So we really are in the numbers crunch part of the year where they have to start prioritizing the board and figuring out who can get in what spots.
One position we do not have questions about is quarterback for Georgia. They've got the 2 commits in Dylan Raiola and Ryan Puglisi, and they're going to be among the best quarterbacks in the country starting on Wednesday out in Los Angeles for the Elite 11 finals. I wanted to set you up for this, Ben, because you did a really good story talking to Elite 11 director Brian Stumpf about both quarterbacks. What did you take away from your conversation about what he sees in both these quarterbacks and what they could put on display out in LA?
For sure. Yeah. I wanted a chance to talk to him just because I know he was someone that got eyes on them, especially in Ryan's case, sooner than a lot of people did. He saw Dylan Raiola going back to a 2021 academy that they did. And so he said to me, I could tell then that he physically was built a little bit different. I mean, he's got a strong base. He's a little bit sturdier than a lot of quarterbacks are. And he recognized that from a young age. But what really impressed him, I think, with Dylan was, one, the NFL pedigree that he comes from. He knows that he's going to care about football. He's going to work. He knows that sport means a lot to that family, and that's going to dictate the way that he works. But I think what he also noticed, and I put this in the article, is Dylan was anointed the number 1 guy, pretty early on, about a year and a half ago. And it's not something that Dylan asked for. He didn't ask to be the best player in the country. And so a lot of guys, you worry about how they might handle that. And he hasn't seen a change in Dylan over the course of that time from 2021 to now. So I think that he sees him as a leader. I think we've seen that just in how he's recruiting in this 2024 recruiting class. I mean, every single school that I've been out to over the last week and a half talking to guys that are associated with Georgia have mentioned Dylan's name, not just as someone that they are aware is in the class, but someone that has deliberately reached out to them to make sure that they realize that there's someone that's wanted in Athens. So that's just a common theme that you see. And then on Ryan's side, I know that he was someone that a lot of Georgia fans, even myself, were not aware of pretty early on through the evaluation process. He was someone that came onto the scene a little bit more recently, obviously, than in Raiola's case. With Brian Stumpf, what he called out was they also run a national showcase in baseball. And he said, I focus about 99% of my time on football, so I don't pay a ton about the rosters and the things that are going to be coming here. But when he went to that area code games event, Ryan Puglisi was there as a middle infielder for the Northeast team that was, the Yankees team that was there from the Northeast. And he was just like, wow, I didn't realize that we had a guy that was that dominant in both sports. And so that's really what caught his eye. He said that when you look at Ryan play, one, the arm strength, he thinks that he might have the strongest arm of anybody that's going to be out in LA this week, but just the off-platform throws, just sort of the loose athleticism that he has to make plays. You can kind of see with a middle infielder in baseball, just the way that he kind of moves and is comfortable, with doing things athletically outside of football. That's something that I think the Elite 11 guys really value. And I think you've heard Kirby Smart mention this as well. Multi-sport athletes have been devalued over the course of time. And I think there's a lot of coaches really ingrained in it that still value it very, very highly. And I think with both of these guys, Dylan and Ryan, you're getting guys that are very good athletes in both sports. And you see a lot of their baseball pedigree bleed through in terms of how they play the quarterback position.
We'll hear a lot over the next few days about how they perform and, sort of what they make of their time at the Elite 11 finals. Kip, when you look at both guys being there, what do you want to hear from how they performed? What are the things you are looking for what you would consider to have been for both of them a successful time at the Elite 11 finals? You're muted, Kip.
Rookie
move. I was due. I had a good run there. I don't think there's going to be any issues with arm strength for either one of these quarterbacks out there. I'm actually fascinated by the fact how similar these guys are in terms of their talent and what they bring to the table, because they both drive the ball with a lot of velocity, and they can both make throws to all three levels of the field. They both are very confident in their arm. I think with Dylan Raiola, his issues kind of come with his feet. We talk about off-platform throws with both of these guys. With Dylan, sometimes he'll go to that when he doesn't need to, and he won't, plant his back foot, and he gets, there's some issues there with that. And so I want to see some, just some improvements to see that he's worked on his footwork this offseason. And with Ryan Puglisi, I think for him, he knows he's also got that arm and can make throws off platform, and he's just not afraid to gun it. And so he'll make some ill-advised throws because he's confident in his arm. And sometimes, you can get a little too, overconfident there. You can have some unforced errors. So it's decision-making with Ryan. You can make all the throws, but sometimes you got to make the smart throw. And so, especially, coming from Connecticut to the SEC, you're going to be stepping up a little bit in competition there. Those windows are going to be even tighter. You got to make smart decisions with the football. And as we said with Kirby Smart, he also places a high value on that. He loves mobility. He loves, he wants the ability to evade the pass rush, but he does not want turnovers at the quarterback position, or just bad decisions that put you, behind the sticks. So I think that's going to be what you want to see from Ryan is good decision making, and with Dylan, some improvement on the footwork. But I think as far as throws and wild throws, no shortage of those from these two guys.
Before we wrap this episode up, got to bring back the Georgia Men's Basketball Minute. Some news on the scheduling side earlier this week. We knew that Georgia was going to be going to the Bahamas for a tournament, still working to get that travel approved to go cover that one. But they will be opening that tournament against Miami, playing a Final Four team. That will be not Georgia's season opener, but it will be early on in the going for non-conference. Really like that scheduling. I thought Georgia was a little lackluster as far as its non-conference opponents in Mike White's first season, which honestly made a lot of sense. It kind of got Georgia a little bit of momentum going into conference play. They're looking to take a step forward this year, got a whole new revamped roster, and all of a sudden you're seeing them play some pretty tough teams. Playing Miami, they could play either Providence or Kansas State if they were able to beat Miami. And they would, they will go on and play one of those teams no matter what. In that Bahamas tournament, they're playing Oregon in Las Vegas to open the season. Really like to see, how they're going about scheduling this, putting the schedule together as they get ready for Mike White's second season in Athens. Well, on that note, we're going to wrap this episode up. Appreciate everyone who tuned in, everyone who checked everything out. Be sure, if you are not already a Dogs 247 VIP subscriber, take advantage of our 60% off deal. It runs until Thursday night at midnight. I cannot recommend it enough. I tweeted this out yesterday. We had a ton of VIP content on the site. Kip, Ben, and I have been cranking it out these last couple weeks, and I know that is not going to change. So can't recommend it highly enough. Great stuff from everybody on the team, and And heck, I like Kip was saying earlier, trying to get caught up reading all this stuff because we learn as much reading each other as we do going out and talking to people. So can't recommend that highly enough. Be sure to go jump on that. But we will wrap this episode right there. For Kip Adams and Benjamin Wolk, I am Jordan Hill. And until next time, take care, everybody.